It's been a while since we have seen a lot of people talking about revenue operations, and it seems that now it's becoming a buzzword. And we run the risk of talking about revenue operations and considering revenue operations as everything. But thanks God, we have some right books that tell us what revenue operations is and how you can, establish revenue operations plan in your organizations. One of these, I think that probably the manifesto of revenue operations is revenue operations, a new way to align sales and marketing, monetize data, and ignite growth by Stephen Diorio and Chris Hummel. And I'm more than happy to have Stephen Diorio here in the show. Hi, Stephen. Nice to meet you first.
It's great to be here. I'm super excited to chat.
Good, good. So, just to, if it's okay for you, just tell our, let's say, our listeners or the people who are on the show, who are you? A brief introduction about you, your experience, and what you do now.
Fantastic. So, I'm first of all, I'm Italian. Second, I'm a trained engineer. I grew up in the factory, so I understand Six Sigma, continuous process improvement. Uh, I've seen the power of systems and processes in the supply chain and in the operations. I grew up at GE. I wound up in corporate sales and marketing. And over the years, I've become sort of an expert of go to market strategy, which really is the unification of sales and marketing. I've tried to bring process discipline to that. And as you know, over the arc of my career, from say the early 80s to now, if you look at what I've seen, the commercial mix was all sales people, media, very little data, very little technology. The best you could do was mail something, really, or maybe call centers. Over that arc, if you think about the portfolio of growth investment to today, we're seeing technology and technology enabled digital channels and the data and content needed to support them command two-thirds of growth investments. Over that time, human sellers, with lips that move, um, used to be 100% of the sales process. Now they're 13%. So if you look under the hood, over the period of time where I had this wonderful head of hair afro-ish thing to now nothing, I think form follows function. And my journey has been first helping folks like IBM build call centers and e-commerce channels, then helping people adopt CRM, Salesforce, and now uh, seeing the marketing technology and sales technology stacks blend and merge. Marketo used to be a email marketing machine. Now it's used for everything, according to them. And so the distinctions between the technologies, the numbers of technologies, and the importance of binding these technologies into a system, everything complicated in the world, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, cars, computers, education, all has a system. A lot of moving parts, people, process, technology. The only thing that doesn't have a system is this incredibly complicated go to market system. Somehow it's been regarded as exceptional. Marketers are artists, sellers are charismatic. And I think finally the day of reckoning has come where the complexity, the number of pieces of technology, the amount of data, the amount of capital, quite frankly, $10,000, $15,000 per rep, has forced people to come up with a system. The name du jour of that system is revenue operations. I didn't make it up. It seems to describe what's going on, but I think your instinct is correct. We need to break that down in terms of what it means at the CEO level, at the operations level, and most importantly, uh, at the rep or seller level. And so, unfortunately, we spent years building out a book and a framework to try to unpack that. It reads a little bit more like a chemistry book. There's a periodic table in there. But I think the science of this has to get out there because we lack a vocabulary, an operating system, a frame of reference for what is going on. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded answer, which started with my hairline, but I think that gets us to a good place of why this topic even exists.
No, but thank you because I loved not only the headline, the introduction, but also how we ended up with the answer. But let me just tell the listeners, like the people on the show, how I kind of get to know you, because I got to know you through the Revenue Enablement Institute, and that was like I think a few years ago probably. And I started following you, and then the book came out, and I just want to, if it's okay for you, just say a few words on the Revenue Enablement Institute, what you do there, how do you help clients, and how do you, move these signs forward.
Sure. So if you go back in time, I was the first sales and marketing technology analyst at Meta Group, now Gartner Group, in 1987. Unfortunately, if I think something's a good idea, I'm probably 20 years too early. Uh, so, and I think what you've seen is if you map the history of sales, two-thirds of selling time is not spent with the customer. That's like a law of nature. It's still that. If you look at the latest Salesforce report, it's still two-thirds, but it's different. What they're doing is very different. But what I saw was generations of people who wanted a silver bullet deploying technology in silos of excellence. And when there was three or four technologies, CRM and a couple of other things, that was fine. But now there's over 10,000 technologies, and the machines they're building, it's like piles of spark plugs and carburetors and cylinders. They don't come together into an internal combustion engine. It's just a pile of parts. And so they're asking, the mechanic or the person using it to design it. They're asking them to integrate across functions. They're asking them to take risks. They're asking them to deploy capital. They're asking them to change the scorecard. And none of those things can happen at the director or manager level. Only those things can come from the top. So to answer your question, in my experience, in order for any technology to be deployed, and technology adoption rates are painfully low 30 40 years after this, it's all because the people at the top lack the technical acumen, lack the will to change, they lack a blueprint, and they lack control over the entire revenue cycle, and the willingness to take risks. So I think the reason we wrote the book and created the Institute is we needed to educate the most senior growth leaders and CEOs and boards about this. And our weapon of choice is academics. There's a lot of science out there. We're affiliated with Wharton. We have a lot of professors. The best professors in the science of growth are on our faculty, and practitioners. The only credible source are people who have actually run it. We've got the CMOs of SAP, CVS, Walmart, and people like that, senior executives on our faculty. And as you know, we profile what a good senior executive looks like, and then obviously expertise. And so for us, the only way that you're going to affect change is to educate senior people, and they listen to academics and peers and people who wrote books for some reason. And so we've gone a little bit heavy. It's not, an airplane read, but it is a blueprint, and it's got an evidence, just tons and tons of research in there that makes the case that a CEO, the board, and the senior leadership of the organization has to be serious about commercial transformation. So the Institute was born that way because it's our weapon of choice, education. And it's the only way I think we can make an impact on changing the world.
I totally agree. And you know what? I'm happy that you kind of anticipated my next question about the book. And talking about the book, I really liked it. And like when you read a book, you got what you want to get according to your knowledge, but also to the time of uh, of your life, the time you're living. And I found it really insightful because I read between the lines that you are really suggesting with this book to C level what to do and how to transform their commercial operations. And why I read these things between the lines because I'm having a lot of conversations with C levels about revenue operation, commercial transformations, especially on the, let's say, DocGen, CPQ, and CLM side. And so I really read between the lines that this book is a good one for the CEO. And I'd like to talk with you about really why do you really mention the CEO as the catalyst of these revenue operations transformation? So let me start with these questions. So why is the CEO so important for a commercial transformation project?
Great. I'll do that. One, nothing matters from a measurement or motivation standpoint unless it can be directly tied to firm value and financial performance, uh, meaning the stock price. That makes the world go round. That is the vocabulary that everybody in the transformation game needs to understand. That's how you talk to a CEO and the board. Fortunately, if you look at the average business today, um, organizations are realizing that the things that drive firm value are the customer experience, customer lifetime value. For the 50% or more of organizations that are becoming SaaS organizations, net recurring revenue, total contract value, um, customer retention. So finally, the boardroom conversation about growing the value of the business is around metrics that require growth metrics. Those growth metrics span the entire revenue cycle. That's material. In my 45-year career arc, we've had conversations about sales and marketing. We've talked about now SaaS businesses. At the end of the day, we've moved from a sales funnel to acquire companies to more of a butterfly, where most of the action, energy, value, and investment is coming after the initial booking. And so expansion, retention, cross sell is the measure of the day. If you're going to look and manage the bow tie, the only person who controls all of those people, from product to marketing to sales to success to account management, is the CEO. The only person who can knit together all the points of failure along that journey is the CEO. And that requires that means one common scorecard. Everybody with lips who talks to the customers needs to be compensated on one thing: customer lifetime value. The measurements they use. We can't be having fights about marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and then amendments down in the revenue cycle. We can't be doing that because there's just too much revenue and margin leakage that's causing. And then if you look deeper under the hood, that butterfly will be supported by 10, 20, 30 operations groups, each running separate instances of technology, each with different data architectures, each leaking out information to drive things. And they sit on top of, if you think about the CEO, the balance sheet. They have cash, they have investable securities, they probably have buildings, factories, and inventory. All of those pale in comparison to the value of the brand, the customer data, and the digital selling infrastructure that they have built. Think about Amazon. What are they worth outside of their e-commerce engine? And with 83, 84% of selling happening over a digital selling infrastructure, your primary conduit to the customer, the balance sheet, the financial value of the business from an asset standpoint, most of that is the customer data and digital technology and brands. They're intangible assets, but they are big financial assets. So if you start to think about why the CEO cares, they're the only person who controls every customer that touches the customer. They're the only person who can say the scorecard for everyone in this business from the top to the bottom is growing that customer value. And the only person to say, I've just spent 2/3 of my CapEx and OpEx budget on technology and technology enabled channels, and I am demanding a return on assets, not a return on investment. I've built a car that is likely firing on one cylinder, to use an engineering term. And that's really the only person who could see that and impact that is the CEO. But putting it in financial terms is the way to get them to act. Finally, they're the ones to take the risk. CEOs have over delegated to the poor directors of operations. They can't take risks. Nobody works for them. They're being asked to get everybody else in the organization who doesn't work for them to cooperate. Uh, they can't drive change management. They can't change the way people are paid and compensated. So it's absolutely ridiculous that the people who actually know what they're doing, the RevOps people in the middle of the organization, I don't have to educate those guys. They know what to do. But they're being asked to. It's like asking a 5-year-old to, go out there and play professional football. They just don't have the wherewithal to do it. Not that they got the brains and the know-how, but they just don't have the size and scale and scope to do it. And so I think that arbitrage between the CEO and the ops people in the middle of the organization is really what the book is about. We're teaching ops people how to talk to the CEO. We're teaching operations to the CEO, and we're getting them to take ownership and responsibility. And I don't think until you bridge that gap, I don't think anything good is going to happen.
And how's the situation now? And let me tell you why I asked you this question, because I see really that some CEOs are not keeping up with this transformation. You know what I mean? It's like it seems that some of them don't really see the need of bridging this gap. Based on your experience, how's the situation out there?
It's a moving target. There are signs of life. We at the Institute write little meaningful case studies on executives we call CXOs. I don't really care what the title is. That's what the X stand for. About a third of them are CEOs. Some of them are chief commercial officers who have the criteria is they have to have the entire revenue cycle under their control. For example, the fellow who's chief commercial officer at Johnson Control, an amazing guy, came from Microsoft. He has one of the biggest CMOs working for him, the entire sales cycle, the business partner network, customer experience. He has ownership of the entire revenue cycle, and he's got a mandate and will to transform that. He's taking that from an equipment company to a data company and an IoT company, and he knows that commercial transformation has to make that happen, and he is empowered to do so. So for me, that's an evidence of somebody who's done a great job. The most recent CEO of Avaya, I know that's not a sexy company, but he took that company from free fall to now where almost half the revenues are SaaS revenues. They're profitable, they're growing, and they've gone from an equipment company to a SaaS company at scale. It's pretty easy to start a SaaS company, arguably, because you're born without that legacy. Turning the ship on a company the size of Avaya, driving that transformation from the top, that's impressive. And so he's sort of a symbol for me of someone who's actually doing the hard work and doing it right. So in our CXO profile, these people are doing 5 things. They're creating a common purpose around the customer. They're creating teamwork. They're taking risks. They're deploying capital. So the nutshell of all this is growing a business is a data-driven, digital, capital-intensive team sport. Like a bunch of robots playing soccer. And people don't manage it that way. And the people who recognize that they've got to drive teamwork, they've got to create one scorecard. In soccer, there's only one goal. There are defenders, midfielders, different skills, different tactics. Everyone's got a different role, but again, everyone knows what they need to do. That's not the case in business, and it needs to operate that way. And they've got to use data. Data is there's a Copernican revolution of data. They've got to use analytics and data to run their business, which again is a RevOps channel, because most board conversations revolve around how bad the data is and how they can't trust what the data tells them. They need to get to the point where they are mining their data, curating their data, and using that data and having confidence in it to tell them something, even if it's imperfect about their business. And I think that's a huge cultural shift. If you think back to e-commerce, there was just a generation of executives who didn't have the technical skills to digest that. Right now at Wharton, we teach a class called AI for Executives. If an executive doesn't understand the math that underlines AI and analytics, they can't manage. They don't have to do the algorithms, but they need to know what's inside of them and how they work. And so there's literally a calculus deficiency at the C level because people are willing to trust black boxes or not trust data. And in either scenario, that's a super risky thing. So this next generation of executives are going to be coming out of RevOps. They're going to be comfortable with data. They're going to know how that relates to finance. They're going to know how that relates to growing a business. But we're probably going to have to wait 10 or 20 years before those people mature enough to be in the C-suite. So I think those are the things that they've got to be good at: common purpose, analytics, teamwork, risk management, and or change management, and capital investment. And those are and that's our research agenda at the institute. So I hope that was useful. I know that's a bit of a dump there.
Oh, it was, and I'm happy that you also covered the profile. Let's say the skills that they need to embark in this transformation. But now I have probably a tricky question for you because let's say that we're talking to a company where the CEO doesn't see the need of a commercial transformation. Okay, probably that CEO will be replaced. I don't know what his or her future will be, but if we don't have a commitment from the CEO to transform, who can replace him or her? You know, what happens in a company that doesn't have a revenue operations minded CEO? Who
That
can
is
lead the change? You know,
so I don't know. I'm really old, but one of my favorite shows when I grew up was MASH. And MASH had a lovable but incompetent CEO. But they had an incredibly competent clerk named Radar O'Reilly. And what I hear a lot of executives tell me is Radar O'Reilly had his hands on everything wired together. He told the CEO basically what to do. He had the relationships and the trust of everybody, and he stitched it together, even though he wasn't in charge. I think that's the answer. Is that somebody they call them a RevOps superstar who is working behind the scenes. They have their hands on the data, and they're stitching it together with spit, failing wire, and relationships. To be honest, I think a lot of commercial processes today are being held together by a person like that in the middle of the organization. And they're doing the CEO's job and they're doing everyone else's job because they see the problem firsthand. For example, um, in a SaaS model, there are a huge number of post booking variables that lead to invoice problems, cash flow problems, disputes with customers. Those are all bad things from a cash and customer perspective. Nobody's responsible for fixing them because the problem was created in the front of the front of the house, and the finance people are still working with spreadsheets, and they don't know what's going on. They don't trust data, and so I'm seeing RevOps people bridge that gap, fix those problems, ward those problems off. It's not even their job. And so the thing with RevOps and the reason the job description is so complicated, we published a big report on that, is that a lot of it is an informal job. They're just doing stuff that's right that they're not even supposed to be doing because they know it's a team sport and they know they've got to knit this together even though they're not being told to make the machine run. So I think two answers to your question. 10 years ago, you could ignore this and there really wouldn't be consequences. Nobody knew that your machine wasn't running well because you could fake it. Now I think the consequences are real. Any company that is about to go IPO, that has professional investors looking under the hood, sees revenue leakage, and I see them hire really strong RevOps people to get the net recurring revenues in shape before the IPO. They get deadly serious about it. Likewise, coming out of COVID, with 83% of the sales process being digital, you're going to see it in the growth numbers. 10 years ago, you could probably hide it. I think right now, if you're in a SaaS business and you're a CEO who doesn't want to embrace commercial transformation, it's going to show up within 12 to 16 months and you're going to be gone. And then the second thing is a lot of times they just trust the data scientists, trust the algorithms, and magically trust that some superstar in the middle of their organization is going to knit it all together without being told. And I think both of those are unsustainable.
you know what? I I thank you for the answer, but I also agree on the selling side, and because most of the time, when you do kind of enablement, they tell you who's the buyer persona, who should you sell to and talk to in a conversation. And what I'm seeing now is that most of the time that profile doesn't fit anymore because the people I talk to are really people from, like, I don't know, working in the background, as you said, from revenue operation, people that don't even have revenue operation in their title, but they are doing this massive job as an influencer inside the company to move the things. And this makes my job as a salesperson more difficult, but for sure more interesting. Because if before I was, I don't know, prospecting top down from the C level down to the head of and then director and so on, now I can have an hidden influencer who's probably even an engagement manager. You know what I mean? Probably someone who is starting the revenue operations job in his or in her company. And this makes the job really interesting because it also forces us as salespeople to adopt the selling to the new profile we have in front of us. I'm talking for those who sell usually to revenue operations people. But by the way, I want to also ask you another question about one of the theories, or let's say framework, I enjoy and I like the most inside the book. It's 9 blocks of revenue operations. And for those of you who are listening, if you want to know more about, just buy the books because we have no time to go through all that. But by the way, let's focus on these 9 blocks of revenue operations. And I really would like to know what's the CEO role, job involvement in this framework.
That's a great question. So let's get back to selling has become a data driven, digital, capital intensive team sport. The average organization has, we're just coming up with these numbers. It used to be 20, it's more like 30 or 40 uh, pieces of technology that's deployed in dozens of silos with an admin cost that is completely huge. The average frontline seller has $10,000 or more of technology and data backing them up. That's low, by the way, compared to a McDonald's worker, a truck driver, or an Amazon warehouse worker. Yet, we need to demand a return on that. That's a decent capital stake. We should demand returns in terms of quota attainment and customer lifetime value around that. So I think what you're seeing, and then those stacks are merging. People are asking the question, what's the difference between marketing technology and sales technology? And my answer is in 18, 24 months, nothing. It's all should be interconnected. So the answer is this is an incredibly complicated system of moving parts, people, process, technology. There is no blueprint or architecture or governing principles for how that needs to come together. In this world, the team that connects those dots the best wins, and there is no blueprint. I'll use it as an example. Gartner Group, Forrester, all of the people who evaluate software have created hundreds and thousands of categories. Every software firm puts themselves in a unique category, 1,000 points of light. All Forrester can tell you is in this category. This spark plug, this one is better than the other. They're not telling you how the internal combustion engine can run better, higher RPM, better mileage, more torque, more horsepower. They're just telling you that I can optimize this spark plug. So the only thing they can do is describe a spark plug, and then describe which one's the best. But there are no spark plugs anymore. There are fuel ingestion systems, subassemblies. The average organization in our ranking of the most robust commercial technologies spans 5 to 7 Gartner categories. They're in 5 or 6 magic quadrants because what these guys are doing, they're trying to connect the dots. The value is connecting the dots. Sales enablement doesn't do any good if it's not connected to Salesforce, if it's not connected to the content, and quite frankly, if it's not connected to training. It's just a silo of automation. So we're seeing all of these things come together like carbon chains, like a chemical equation. What we've done with the boxes is simplify literally a periodic table for commercial transformation. We've created an entirely new vocabulary, a set of elements. So I can describe the elements of the commercial engine. Uh, Water is just H2O. Oil is a complex hydrocarbon with many things. So we've broken that 9 boxes down to a periodic table that allows somebody to describe the ways the knee bone connects to the thigh bone, connects to the hip bone to generate more sales. How I'm going to combine elements of my technology ecosystem to create something better. It's a chemical formulas, it's a periodic table, but it's a better box of crayons to describe commercial transformation. And it's an architecture that can be pushed from the top down. It lets conversations happen. It lets people describe their tech stacks in ways that are not thousands of magic quadrants. And so what we've done is created an operating system for growth. The reason that matters to the CEO is somebody has to impose a system of order for how they want it to come together. The details may vary from company to company. You may call things differently, but right now it's anarchy. There is no governing principle. So maybe ours isn't the best. It's comprehensive. Most of the people in the industry buy into it, and it lets you do smart things, baby steps, connect oxygen to hydrogen to create water, and then maybe we can make wine later on. But again, we're building towards something. Any system will do. We just felt like it was a big gap, and we call it the revenue operating system. And at its highest level, it's 9 boxes, and I can talk about them because that's still a lot, but at least I'm not talking about chemical elements at that point.
But if you want, we can, do another episode and we go into chemicals. No, but by the way, I agree on that thing. So I really see the CEO as being the person who plants this kind of seed, of the commercial operations transformation, then orchestrate the changes because he then allocates it to more specific functions who can really go and move forward. And I'm happy for your answer. I hope that most of the CEOs will will
Well, here's the
kind of
question:
follow
they
it.
have to they
Yeah.
have to ask for a roadmap. Everybody says we need this 31st piece of technology because it solves our problem. It solves a problem, but it doesn't solve these problems, and it creates problems in terms of complexity, panes of glass, overhead, and expense. And at some point, if you have too many pieces, the whole thing actually gets worse. So what the CEO has to ask is, where's our blueprint? Where are we going with this? What is our system? My system may be good or bad, but somebody's got to say there's got to be a blueprint. You can't just let this come together organically. It just won't happen.
It will just it will not pop up magically. Let me put it in this way. By the way, another concept I really liked of your book is the definition you give of salespeople. It was kind of a while I didn't see a new idea of a salesperson inside the book, and I think that you have been one of the first in talking about the salesperson who has to sell the IP. So you talk about this shift in the essence of selling, and you kind of focus on the fact that salespeople now are selling at an IP level because all the data equals money. So my question for you is, what kind of characteristics should the successful revenue operations salesperson have to even have good conversations, valuable conversation, and start a transformation in
I
the
think
company's industry?
that's a great question. And I think this thing barbells from the CEO to the operations people to the frontline sellers. So let's unpack that because this is lost in the equation. I'm glad you mentioned this. So there's a term out there called a 4D seller. They're data driven, distributed, digital, and diverse. And 83% of their customer buying cycle is digital. So first, they've got to master moments that matter. You only get one shot, and in that shot, the customer doesn't care what your job function is. They want answers, they want expertise, and they want it fast, and they want it to be in context of what they're doing. So the amount of time I have to actually engage that customer uh, is important. Technology, what we're calling RevOps, should make me more impactful. I should be able to prepare faster, anticipate faster, find the right context, bring the right expertise from my organization to the table, even if they don't work for me, and follow up efficiently. So a lot of the 2/3 of the time not spent with customers is sifting through what is relevant. What do these people needs? Where are they in the journey? How are they consuming? What's happening with my contract? I need to know all that stuff. And what questions that they ask and what information can I get? And that's a lot. Organizations have hundreds of solutions to cross sell. Um, they're dozens of data sources. I get one. I have an AI who tells me 2 hours before the meeting, this is everything that has happened to your friend on the other end of the phone that you're about to meet with. They just got married, their company got sold, they had a kid, whatever it was. And that puts it on the head of a pin when I still have time to react. If I had to do that manually, I would spend 4 hours, 10 hours preparing and catching up. But the world is too fast right now. So I think you've got to think about a couple of things. The other thing is prioritizing their time. So, if you look at it, every seller is probably selling to people who aren't ready to buy. And because they're in a geographic territory, they're on an account, they sell to people they know. There's this thing called the death of a sales territory. The entire notion that I have the state of Connecticut and only financial businesses in that state is anathema. In a data driven world, these revenue operations people can say these are the hottest opportunities at every stage of the journey that I can affect as a person because of my relationships or whatever. That should be my to-do list everywhere. If that's happening in Hawaii or China or in somebody else's geography, it doesn't really matter. What matters is I am taking actions that can advance the sales cycle with the biggest opportunities. Company A, Bill is a bigger value opportunity than B. He's first on my list today. Mary is ready to buy. I've got signals for that. I know that. Mary's first on my list today. So this whole notion of using RevOps, using the tech, is different. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to become Mr. Spock and become a data scientist, but they have to embrace what science can do. In addition, they have to be like Captain Kirk. They have to have EQ and charm because at the end of the day, the one thing buyers are missing in the digital journey is context and human relationship and trust and sense making. Even though they prefer to go online, they always regret their decision and have nagging fears. So I think that seller, it's an exciting job right now. And some of their parts of their job are being automated, others augmenting the sale, building trust, building confidence in their rep, networking and education are becoming more important. And so their job is changing. They have to use technology to either augment and be smarter or free up time so they can be better. Even though the amount of time they actually have with the customer is smaller, the impact of that is so much bigger. So it's a very exciting time for a seller. Unfortunately, it's a lot just like that other guy. They've got to sometimes cobble this together on their own. It's not being served up to them as neatly as it could be. And I think the people who set their quotas, set their motions, allocate their time aren't thinking the same way. They're going to force them to meet with people that they know aren't ready to buy when they could do it on their own. So that's a loaded question, but I've unpacked what's super exciting about these 4D sellers right now.
And thank you for this. You know what I also find exciting now is that the customer, as you said, 83% is digital, and most of the time is spent by people doing research on their own that probably they will regret that they have done because they
Exactly.
spend a lot of time online. But it's like if the buyer expects that we know that he already spent some time online. So he kind of says that that time allocated for that research is the time that he allocated to talk to company X. And what I see now is that we have less time to talk to the buyer, but the buyers become tired of questions way earlier. So you really have to, as you said, prepare a lot, kind of automate a certain part of the sales cycle, but also be impactful by shortening the questions you have by kind of reducing the number, maybe five, six impactful questions, and then keep things going by educating at the same time.
I think you're right.
It's
It's like a curriculum. Are you dealing with first grade math or calculus? The person on the other of the phone might have been studying math for years. You can't go in with first grade math. You've got to be giving them much, but you don't know. Other people, you may have to explain 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Uh, AI and technology can help you be there. Most sales processes is let me explain to you about my product. I think you're making a brilliant point. You have to use that technology to understand where they are, and you've only got 5 questions. You can't waste them on first grade questions if they're in fifth grade or 10th grade. So I think you're dead on there.
yeah, and like I'm seeing these now. People come in, and I see a lot of some kind of coaching I do. Some of my clients, they spend a lot of time by using probably up old methodologies, doing redundant questions, and maybe asking the customer what he already asking the prospect what he already filled in a form online, like how many users, why, instead of trying to find a way to provide more value, like, I don't know, answering a question and then providing information, align some collaterals in order to even be faster than the competition. So I'm happy that.
I think that the speed, and when we say context, it's like, wait a second, he's really smart. He's probably got to the point where he's realizing that this two things don't go together. And that's probably what's on his mind, not describing these two things, but why can't I get these two things to connect? Jump right to that if you can, or lead with that because that's the way they're racing. They're like, I can't go back to the first chapter of the book. I'm trying to get through the 10th chapter. So I think you've captured that moment well. And technology should get us there faster and remind them that this is likely where they are, and these are the pieces of information that will help you.
Absolutely, and be clear with your words. What I'm seeing now is that the old way of saying a lot of words to fill time doesn't exist anymore. A prospect is way more happy to save 20 minutes on a call instead of spending 20 minutes talking to you with a lot of questions which are
And you
redundant
know,
and
there's
so
an
on. Yeah,
interesting correlator to that. Once they trust you, they're going to ask you everything. How do I keep my wife happy? How can I get my kid to score more goals in soccer? And you got to be ready to answer those questions because once you get that trust and they're like, whoa, this person is armed with answers. What about this customer service issue? What about this cross sell? Later on, could I do this? They don't care if you don't know that stuff. You've got to provide the answers. And so that's another aspect of once they trust you, they're going to hit you with every question they got, and you've got to don't let them go. Don't embarrass yourself, but you give them a path to an answer.
and at that point in time, we come back to what you said at the beginning, aligned to the other right functions. Because I think that at that point in time, that is the moment where the salesperson says, "Okay, I'm there. I can answer everything, but I can allocate your questions to the
Mhm.
right people in the organizations." I have other few questions for you, Stephen. And the first one is talking about the landscape, the revenue operations. As I said at the beginning of the episode, everyone is talking about revenue operations. Someone is also using revenue operations to make some money and sit in a spot, to use this kind of new market. Now, the question I have for you is, I already asked you where companies are now in terms of revenue operation. I just want to know, what would you like to see that you haven't seen yet in the companies you talk to?
So this is interesting. Revenue operations is the fastest growing job in America, and yet people can't even describe it. We actually do a lot of research. I talk to revenue operations people every day, and they're like fingerprints. Everybody's job is a little different. Loosely, they span 5 core areas: commercial operations, architecture, insights, enablement, and asset management. And underneath that, there's about 12 basics of the job. Anybody I talk to is doing three, four, or five of those in different combinations. What this means is there was a funny quote. What's the difference between marketing operations and sales operations? And the answer is 18 months. They're going to be the same job. It's the same technology, same motion, same commercial model, same data. And I think that's the way to think about it. The way I think a practitioner should think about it, it's a ticket to the C suite. The head of the CRO association says, we're not, this is the next generation of CROs. They're going to come out of operations. Most uh, most chief revenue officers come out of sales, but they're saying they're going to come out of operations. The other thing is RevOps is making it into the boardroom by learning financial skills and learning data skills. Uh, RevOps people are getting into the boardrooms because they can double click into the answers to the questions. That's super exciting to me. I think RevOps is going to be a C suite function. A lot of executives won't tell me the name of the revenue operations leaders because they don't want me to write about it in Forbes or talk about it on a podcast because someone's going to steal them. They're almost like, precious metals. Just like, and so I think those are all super exciting developments. The Bob Liodice, the CEO of the ANA, the Association of American Advertisers, said, if you want a career in marketing, you've got to learn revenue operations. The teachers of Wharton say, we've failed uh, the next generation of leaders because growing a business is interdisciplinary. It requires finance, analytics, marketing, brand management, and sales. And we don't teach them like that. We need an interdisciplinary major where people have that mix of skills because there are no longer any marketing jobs. There are no more sales jobs, as you pointed out. I need to understand all of these things. So I think the next generation of leadership is going to come from this gene pool. And, we've actually, the RevOps job description is a roadmap. It's a moving target. Today, it's going to be this, but tomorrow, it's going to be even broader and broader and broader. And pretty soon, it's going to be cracking into the C suite, just like customer success. So I think it's a wonderful career path. Analytics people can get into it. Salespeople can get into it. Operations and enable people can get into it. Finance people can get into it. All of a sudden, they're realizing if I want to get financial control over my revenue cycle, I'd be better off. The operations people have more of the levers of control than the finance people do with the general ledger system. So I think it's a super exciting environment to be in from a career path. And obviously, the boxes aren't yet on the org chart, but you can see it all coming together. And we really, want to make sure that we accelerate that process.
Yeah, and I also see, as you said, based on the education, I see that this really changes the criteria by which we hired people. The huge specialization moment we went through with people with specialized skill, and it seems that at the revenue operations level, everything mixes up. And you have this profile of people who have to know everything on the revenue operation, but also understand it and understand how it evolves. So you need people who understand sales, marketing, customer success, the whole spectrum of the revenue function. And I think it's really exciting, especially because it gives us a kind of path for the future. Let's say that I'm in sales. I don't want to be a manager. I see it capped. Okay, I can go back, I can study, and maybe I can make it in the revenue operation space. So I think this is really exciting.
I'll give you an example. My nephew, Mike Diorio, he, like a lot of young people, started off in a call center, prospecting. He did well. He was an athlete, but he got intrigued by CRM. He became a CRM administrator, but he got his hands on the data. Once he got on the hands on the data, this 27-year-old kid's in the boardroom now. He's the most valuable guy in that company. He's getting promoted, and he's being pulled into conversations. He probably would have been a great sales rep. He probably would have been a good sales manager. He's a smart guy, and he's Italian, of course. But at the end of the day, once he got his hands on that data, his career just skyrocketed. So I think that that's a good analog for it's people used to think it was a back office function. This is a board level function.
And I'm really happy to see what happens next and what happens in the next few days because, as you said, everything is changing so fast that we have updates kind of every day. I
Mhm.
have one last question for you, which is about the future, and I'm really interested. I know that the book has recently been published. But now, are you working on other projects you'd like to share, other books, other? I know that your research goes
No,
on,
it
and
is.
so.
It is. There's a lot of demand right now. So one project I think is really important, and it's available on our website. This job description, as you mentioned, the book was really written to explain to a CEO and the board how this should work. But with the dynamics of the job, we've just published and done a big initiative on the RevOps job description, and it's a benchmark. It's actually quite useful, and I think you can pull some stuff down off our website. Another thing we're doing is the revenue operating system. We're doing a major initiative working with dozens of companies, and to actually build out from the core platforms of what this operating system looks like. We're not going to recommend specific companies other than Salesforce, who is a bedrock and everything. But what we're doing is um, creating a blueprint and a step by step guide for it's almost like a mechanics manual for how this comes in. We get just dozens and dozens of phone calls every month of people making difficult decisions on how to 95% of organizations are rationalizing their tech stack. There's a project and a person with a face and a name is responsible for that. I get that phone call. And so we're doing an amazing initiative with Greg Munster, who ran all this at IBM and Red Hat, to really make that blueprint at a detailed level for how you actually do that rationalization and the economics that the CFO is going to care about. So that's super exciting for us. And that's a major initiative. A third thing we're doing is we're building a customer data platform for B2B. So if you look at the revenue operating system, it's like orbits around the sun, and the sun is unified customer data around a customer profile that feeds revenue intelligence in the boardroom, account prioritization for sales managers, day-to-day selling conversations, training, pricing, and resource allocation, as well as what the robots say on my chatbot and what the next step is, as well as everything else. And so we're actually working with some technology providers to actually build out that operating system that can ingest data from first party, third party sales CRM services, attach it to a profile, drive ABM programs, and drive prioritization. That's a mouthful, but there's a gap in the market there, and attacking seeing how the blood or the data runs through the system is critical, and providing visibility to that. So that's yet another initiative we're working on. All of this stuff is super exciting. And we have the last thing we're doing is we're helping CFOs understand this because they sit at the back of the revenue cycle and they're looking at all the upstream initiatives. We're building a CFO group to help them understand RevOps. And so, yeah, sorry you asked, but there are so many cool projects going on, and we're building communities around all of these. So, very excited to get more voices in the conversation.
And no, don't worry because I'm excited for you. You know, when I see all these things going on, all this movement, it also benefits me. You know, in the conversations I have because most of the time, a company which produces something, creates something, most of the time is not really able to make that point. Because probably you see the market, so you are kind of
All of our
yeah.
research is from practitioners, people who are trying to make the technology work, and we're in that conversation, and that's an exciting conversation. We're connecting those people to each other, and we're pulling these research initiatives out. So yeah, so much of the research is what the technology can do. I'm really like the fact that our team is talking with the people trying to make it work. The people we're talking about today, the CEOs, the ops people, and the salespeople, and trying to find ways to make their life better.
Good one. So I don't have any other question. So, Stephen, and I really recommend again to all the people who are listening the show to buy a book, read it, start it, and maybe, start a revenue operation transformation in their company. Thank you again for being here, and happy that I discovered that you are Italian too. So we can also say goodbye in the Italian way.
Ok, arrivederci.
Ok, ciao e grazie mille, Steven.
Brava.
Bye bye, and thank
Bye-bye.
you.